Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to The Lazy Actor, the podcast that goes through all the great books of history, the acting books of history, takes out all the key learnings, the fun stories, so you don't have to, because you're too busy trying to make viral TikTok videos. My guest today is the mighty Michael Kostroff. Michael, how are you today, my friend?
I guess I'm mighty. I mean, I'll take it.
And of course, with me as always from radioradio.com, our producer, Tim, my friend. Tim, how are you?
I'm fantastic. Excited about our guest. I just want to sit back and listen.
Excellent. Well, you're going to be doing a lot of listening today, Tim, because I don't want you to say another word after this.
Okay.
I talk a lot.
Michael said that. He says he talks a lot. I might jump in on occasion, but hey, that's the beauty of the podcast. The magic is in the editing afterward. We're going to make you sound brief and to the point. Now, Michael, I want you to take this as the compliment that I mean.
Okay.
Because your career is what I strive for as like the pinnacle of my success.
Aim higher.
And that is this. Many of our listeners might not know your name off the top of their head, but the second they see you, they're gonna be like, "Oh my God, that guy! He's in everything."
Right. No.
And that is the career that I strive for. Stephen Tobolowsky, those kind of guys are amazing.
I do take that as a huge compliment because it's a perfect place to be. You know, I really enjoy it. I have, without naming any names, I have a couple of friends who are very famous, and it's not a comfortable life in many ways. They can't just go out to a coffee shop or, I fly under the radar, and also I work a lot. So it's great. I love it.
It's the working a lot that is we have part of this podcast is run by the actorsplace.org, which is a community of actors here in Toronto.
Ooh.
And we always have the hashtag seething with envy. So when someone gets a part, we always say, "Hey, hashtag seething with envy. Congratulations." Hashtag seething with envy.
I love the honesty of that.
Because it's so true. That's like, as at the core of things,
Yeah,
and
of course.
We're going to talk about the actor's discipline in a minute. But first, I want to talk about some of the parts that you're most famous for. And certainly, the first time I saw you, I thought, of course, this is the guy that played Francis in General Hospital in 1963.
Oh, my God. Why do people pull out these old credits?
How? Tell me, do you even remember that role? General Hospital.
I remember it very well because, by my estimation, it is the worst on-camera acting I have ever done in my entire career.
It was your first time on camera. In all fairness,
I don't think it was. I don't think IMDb is right about that. It was a soap opera. I had never done a soap. I didn't realize that soaps do one take and they're off to the next scene, and I overacted like crazy because it was a soap opera. I did the thing where you whip off your glasses. I did all the wrong things, and of course the camera was like aimed at my nostrils. So it was. I think Francis was supposed to come back, and they had to sort of change their minds about that. It was, I was awful. It was very bad acting. So thanks for that.
And now here's the thing. And one of the reasons I think you're right about IMDb, because this must have been a traumatic experience, because according to IMDb, you did not work again. This was 1963, and you did not work again until 1980.
Wait a minute. And they have General Hospital in 1963. That's also inaccurate.
Which seems very crazy. And then you had the Dream Merchants. The Dream Merchants.
Yeah. You're taking me way back. Those dates are wrong. Absolutely wrong. I was 2 years old in 1963, so I don't think I was on General Hospital.
Well, I didn't even think it was on. General Hospital was in. If I think of General Hospital, I think of the 80s.
Maybe they think of 61 when I was born in a hospital. That might have been it.
Now, Michael, you are definitely known. I think one of the games we like to play on the podcast is a very traditional kind of audition prep, and we're going to get into auditioning. And that is, you get someone on stage and you say what kind of parts they can play.
Right.
And you are the consummate lawyer / professor at university.
Yeah.
/ I would say the occasional doctor.
Yeah. Lawyers especially have been
that is your bread and butter. You are the lawyer of lawyers and lawyers. But there is a very good underrated show that I loved, in which you had long hair and you played a jailhouse kind of addict druggie. on Banshee.
Yes, I'm
And
so
that's so out of your realm. Tell me a little bit about how that worked.
brother. I mean, first of all, I love that you brought that up. It's one of my favorite jobs ever because it is out of my wheelhouse. And
Yes.
I said to my wife, the best thing about this, I got no fucking bag of tricks for this. Can I curse on this podcast?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I have no bag of tricks. This could really suck, which is the most exciting thing about it. So, like so many things, it happened in a very weird way. I I had auditioned for one of the regulars on the show, and
Oh.
they said, no, Michael's not right for this, but we have something for him in July. This was January. We have something for him in July, which is like, what? Nobody ever books you that far in advance. And my agent laughed and said, yeah, which year? What year? So in July, they called and offered me this role
Really? Just no audition at all.
straight offer. They said,
Interesting.
come do it. And I said, when I got on the set, I said, what, what in what universe did you think of me for this?
Yeah.
And the producers shrugged and said we don't know. We thought it'd be fun. I'm like, I mean, I was so excited that they picked me for this because there are guys who do that kind of part. And I mean, for anybody who didn't see it, I was long haired, tattooed, scarred, snorting coke. I got to do my first and probably last stunt fight. Uh, I mean, I was snorting coke off the naked breasts of a hooker. It was a good job, and
I
like
feel like that should be the Michael Kostroff story. Snorting
yes,
cokes off the naked breast of a hooker. The Michael
right,
Kostroff story.
yeah, because but it was. I mean, it was. It was a great job. I mean, I loved it so much, and it was nothing like what I do. So yeah, thank you for. I love that you saw that.
Well, it was I think it's one of the most underrated kind of gritty action shows in the last
Hmm.
10 years. But because it came out, I think it was on Showtime. It didn't reach the audience that it could have. I think, was it Showtime or
Cinemax or Showtime, one of those
Cinemax?
two.
Yeah, Cinemax.
I think it's
Cinemax.
Cinemax. Yeah.
Now, the one of the reasons I wanted to bring that up is because we are finishing, and I never introduced this podcast well. So we are finishing. This is the end of season 1, Audition by Michael Shurtleff.
Hmm.
And in this last section, it's just his general thoughts, some other things he thinks might be useful. In and it's a summary of the whole book in essence. But there is actually a section where he talks about never say no to an audition. And he says there's sometimes actors will be like, why am I auditioning for this? I'm totally not right for this part. Why am I doing this? And they'll either come in thinking it's a waste of their time or say no. And this is, of course, in the theater. But this Banshee part is a really great example of sometimes playing against part
Hmm.
can really do a lot. And you should always audition for everything. Have
I,
you
I,
ever auditioned? Oh, please go ahead.
I will amend that a little bit. I,
Okay.
I, I feel like I agree with what Shurtleff is saying in terms of not trying to cast or not cast yourself because that's not our job. I mean, we don't know how people, it, that's up to the vision of the director and the producer and the casting person. But I will say that if something is dangerous or violates your personal code, I don't think that we have to do everything. And the reason I say that specifically is that I've heard particularly actresses say, well, if there's nudity, you have to do it. I'm like, you don't have to do it. You can have a policy about that. Or, I mean, there are certain kind of parts that for example, I don't want to say the N word. I'm glad there are actors who will. I'm glad there are because that's storytelling. But I can decline that. That's the only thing I would add to that is I think actors sometimes go along in their careers feeling powerless and not feeling
Certainly.
like they have any agency. And so I think I would just add that you can turn an audition down if it's really just not a job that you want to do at all. But I think not because you don't think you're right for it.
Yeah. So one of the things that it's interesting that you're saying an actor has some agency and often an actor feels powerless.
Mm.
And this is directly to what you were saying in one of your courses on the psychology of auditioning is the concept of supply and demand.
Yeah. Yeah.
And this is where the contradiction is, my friend, isn't it? Because we want to have agency, but I'm going to let you say it. When you think about actors, where's the supply and where's the demand?
Yeah. It's I'm very much a realist. I've been teaching a course called Audition Psych 101 for it's like going on 20 years now.
Since he was
Um,
born.
since I was born, right? which came out of the fact that I was dreadful at auditioning and terrified and horrible, and I had to sort of walk myself through that. And a friend pointed out after many years that she's like, you help me every time I have an audition. I was like, oh, really? She said, yeah. So this ended up being a course. This was the worst description of this that I've ever given in my life. So anyway, but I will go on.
We'll talk about the course more later. Give you a second opportunity. Don't worry.
Great. Give me the question again. You're asking about the supply and demand thing?
So I'm to plan with how can an actor have agency? How can an actor feel like, you know what, I'm going to say no to things, because we often feel powerless when we take into account the fact that, hey, does the world need more actors?
I think you can hold both truths at once. The reality is the supply and demand sucks. There are always more actors than there are jobs, and that's a given. And another given is that we are probably not going to book most of the stuff we audition for, and very few of us will have careers that, be able to make a living. That's all reality. It doesn't mean that you have to jettison any sense of being able to decide what you want to do. It doesn't mean that you have to put up with abuse. I mean, there are actors who think, well, I can't go out of town because what if I miss a job? I can't go see my family.
I feel that.
It's just not mentally healthy. And I think keeping your brain together is an important part of survival in this career, and having some sort of balance. So on those occasions when, I won't put up with an abusive director, and I'll very graciously say, I think this job is not going to work out, and leave. And I think we have to feel that we can do that. I mean, certainly if somebody's feeling sexually harassed, they don't have to put up with it. They can go. And I don't think you have to sacrifice your sense of autonomy or your sense of agency just because the jobs are so scarce.
Now, let me throw in another one for you, because I really love what you're saying here in terms of, you don't have to put up with things. And because we're talking about audition and you're all about the psychology of auditioning.
Yes.
What do you do when you feel you're not being respected? And this is very rare. It has happened to me once only and I've been acting for about 15 years now in film and television. And it's happened twice, actually. One with a casting director in Vancouver who is notorious for being just terrible to actors. Like, he tried to throw you off your game. And once here in Toronto I'll give you in Toronto, I did the audition, and the casting person, it was a casting assistant, said, hey, could you just do that better? And in the room, no one had ever said that to like that in such a brazen way. And Michael Shurtleff's going to talk about this, and we'll refer to in a minute. But suppose you're in that situation. What do you do? I'm going to put you in that context there.
I have to warn you, I have about 5 answers to this question, and you're going to find that's a pattern, because there are always lots of sides to this.
The hardest part will make me remember what number we're on.
Yeah, well.
All right, I'm going to count. I'm going to put my hands up. We're going to count.
No. Number one. It was an approximation. On the one hand, I find that actors are very prone to interpret things as insults that aren't, because we feel so weak and so out of control and resentful that if somebody looks at us the wrong way. I'll give you an example. I was directing a show, and the artistic director was next to me on his computer the whole time that people were singing and performing. He was taking notes on their auditions. A lot of people probably thought that was disrespectful, and he wasn't disrespecting them at all. In fact, he was paying careful attention to them. And I find that people will often interpret things as insults. There was a guy in one of my classes who said, this casting director was totally disrespectful to me. I finished singing, and she said, thank you so much for coming in. And I went, well, that's not really an insult. So that's the one thing, is I think we have to be careful of the chip on the shoulder. I also try to think of myself as, one of my golden rules is take care of them, don't ask them to take care of you. So I think of them as stressed out, toddlers, not toddlers, but they've got stress, and I want to add calmness to their day. And if they're a little snippy, I'm going to choose gracious strength, which is a great phrase that I came up with for not being a pushover, but also not letting yourself get knocked down either. It's what I call, what would Judi Dench do?
I think, Tim, can you make a note of that? The gracious strength, I think, is a great little thing that we can talk about later. We'll put that in the show notes.
Yeah. Well, I thought about, what do these big stars do? Some of most of them, most of the really nice stars, they make you feel like you're the only person in the room, and you also wouldn't fuck with them, and that's a combination that I sort of go for. Um, so that said, if somebody is overtly rude, in a perfect world, if I'm following my textbook approach, I would give them a very warm smile and say, I don't allow people to speak to me this way. So I'm going to go, and I wish you the best in your casting. And I would leave.
And that's a great way. All three of those are great strategies. We got to
Yeah,
3, which was pretty good. And I think that's the nice thing. Getting mad in the room will never help.
it doesn't. And actually, even more gracious than what I just said would be to smile and say, I feel like I'm not going to be able to give you what you need today. So
I love that.
let's do this on another time. So not even pointing out their bad attitude.
I think taking that benevolent road is great, because I'm not sure if you and let's talk about this. And I know sooner or later we're going to get into this book. We're going to
I
get
hope
into this
so.
book.
I hope it's a classic.
I know. I made him read all this book, and now we're not talking about it.
We have to.
Now, the industry outside of Los Angeles, and I know this is true in Atlanta, this is true in Vancouver, this is true in Toronto, and the other smaller markets. I mean, those are the big outside of LA markets in North America. Is that there's 3 or 4 casting directors that do everything.
Mm.
LA is different in that
Yes.
there's many, many casting directors for many, many things. But the power of the casting director in these smaller markets, in Atlanta, it's the same thing. There's 2, 3 people that handle almost, I would say, 70% of all the work. That's true in Toronto, and that's true in Vancouver. So it's really important to be, even if they are mean to you,
Be lovely.
be lovely to them. And the way you
Yeah.
just finished that last one, you know what? I'm not sure if I'm going to give you what you want.
Yeah.
And leaving in a gracious way.
Yes. Yes. First of all, even more so because it's Canada. Everybody's nice. If we have time, I have to remember to tell you the most Canadian moment I ever experienced.
I will remind you. Tim, put a note. Canadian moments.
And yet, as people are listening to this, I know that sometimes people go, "Well, you're a very established actor, so you can throw your weight around." It's not that. That's not what I'm saying. And I think I was wrong when I said, I don't let people speak to me this way. That's not the right response. But this is my discovery. I think that when you come in like a little beggar and put yourself at this, like a tiny
Yes.
little, like munchkin that a giant is going to step on, that's not comfortable to be around. I think there's this mythology that if we do this, we'll ingratiate ourselves. But if you think about if the roles were reversed, I like the example I always use is like a girl getting asked out by a guy. If the guy's like, I know I barely know you, and I just, you're so beautiful, she's not going out with that guy, So what I've learned is to treat people like colleagues in a friendly way, but that is not weak.
Big time.
Is much more effective. And here's the thing, that takes better care of them. So even I'm going to go even one step more gracious than what I said before. The casting director is being jerk. In your circumstances up there with so few casting directors, I would say, you know what? I want to save you time on this. I think I'm just not getting it. But call me in again, would you? Like really make it about taking care of them, and go, you know what? I feel like I'm frustrating you, and I think you're right. I'm just not right for this, and I'm going to go. Or something that's really says, I'm thinking about you and your time, but not in a small way, not in a super apologetic, grovelly way, because nobody wants to be around that,
Oh, Michael, yes. In fact, this is something that I think that we are already talking about parts of this section, and we're going to keep talking, but I'll refer when we actually get to that point. You love to audition. I also love to audition.
Oh, I'm so glad. That's great.
Because of this book. This is why this is the first book. See what happened. Michael Shurtleff said things like, you have to remember that when you walk into that audition room, for those couple of minutes, you're the only person who has the part.
I talk about that all the time. Yeah.
No one is there to judge you. They're hoping you're going to be great, but they might be seeing 50 people that day, so they're not going to be hugely enthusiastic every single time. But for those few minutes, you have the part. Right. And even if it doesn't go well, your goal, and I think we're on the same page with this. This is Michael Cranston talked about this too, and I think I listened to a great interview.
Brian Cranston.
Brian, that was a test, and you passed. Congratulations. Tim
Well, because
failed because he said
people
nothing.
always see that video and they ask if he's taken my course because he's talking my language.
Well,
Anyway,
and you know, this is one of the things that I always said. My job as the actor is to make the casting director look good in front of the producers. So they're like, man, you got some great talent. You're bringing in the right people, even if I'm not right for the part, because then the
mhm.
casting director will keep bringing you back. Then they'll be on your side. Being nice, trying to be super nice and be their friend will not get them on your side. Coming in with good work gets them on your side.
This is going to be a 3-hour interview because you keep making me think of things.
Good. It is
Um,
since I'm a failed actor, maybe I'll find a career as an interviewer.
Listen, several things. First of all, I just tuned into the phrase, even if the audition doesn't go well, and I think we have to keep redefining what that means because if the only satisfactory outcome is booking the job, we're going to be miserable actors.
Mm-hmm.
I keep reminding people when you don't book the job, nothing has gone wrong. This is the normal thing that happens,
Yep.
and that does not equal I sucked. I did something wrong. That's one thing. I love what you said about right at that moment you're the only one who is doing it. I mean, I was up for Les Mis for years, and at one point they said, "Oh, we're sorry, we keep calling you in." And I said, "Oh, no. When I'm here, none of you get to play Thénardier. Just me. I'm the only one. I'll play this part all day long, anytime you want me to play it." The other thing that I've sort of added to that is, let's say I'm auditioning to play a doctor who has to tell the patient the results of the tests. I go a step further. I think if I don't tell him, nobody else is going to do it. I'm the only doctor in the room. I, I have to do. It's much more important than getting an acting job or doing well or having casting people like me. I have recalibrated myself. So I'm doing the job of the character, which is to figure out how to survive the snowstorm, which is to apply for the job in a hotel, whatever the task is, and it's gotten me really revved up and excited about the acting part and really off the results, which I can't control. I cannot, the great mythology is that there's something you could do to make people hire you. You can't.
Mm-hmm.
So the more you invest in the story, and get back to the acting part, it gets us off our nerves. It makes us look less like grovelly job applicants. And it's like, wow, I'm looking at a professional. I don't want to see an actor auditioning for a job. I want to see the mayor giving a speech. I want to see, an evil, gargoyle who's, come up from hell to threaten me. I don't want to see the actor auditioning for that part. You know what I mean?
You know, I actually auditioned when you said gargoyle. This is
Did
totally off
you?
topic. Well, I auditioned. The very first part I ever got in anything was in Rise of the Planet of the Apes, and I had it was like a one-liner. But before that, I had auditioned to play one of the apes, and it was one of those moments where you wonder, like, you spend all this time in theater school, right? And you
Yeah.
learn in drama, and you're learning like A Streetcar Named Desire and everything.
Right.
And you get in there, and it was literally, it wasn't bad, it was fun. But they're like, okay, you're an angry ape, and I'm like, he's like, no, but now you're scared ape, yeah. And they were just filming the whole time, and the director's yelling out, and I'm like, no, get bigger. I'm like, that was so great, thanks so much. Okay, yeah. So for like 10 minutes, I'm screaming and running around like an ape, and it's like, that was great, thanks so much. And I was like, have a good day.
I have
And
played.
that was my audition. Oh, tell me.
I have played a can of asparagus for
How do you play a can of asparagus, my friend?
well, my can of asparagus was a peacemaker and a diplomat, and that's why he was there. This was a Rite Aid, not a Rite Aid, a Diet Right commercial, cola. Is that the name of it? Diet Right cola, and all of the products were in the grocery store were, embodied by actors, and it was directed by Christopher Guest. I was that. I've also played a crumpled up dollar bill that got caught in the dryer. I've played a lot of odd things, and of course, I toured with the producers, and I was in the ensemble. We played all kinds of parts, including a little old lady with a walker. So I played some. So it's those are the times that you got to laugh and go, "What do we do? What is this thing that we do?"
Yes, it's so
Honestly,
true.
I was a
When
can of
people say,
asparagus.
what did you do today? I ran around a room pretending to be a can of asparagus.
Correct.
I'm an
Correct.
adult man. Thank you. I'm an adult man. Thank you.
I like to keep alive the sense of the silliness of it, you know.
I will tell you, I was so disappointed I didn't get the 8 part
You were
because when we
robbed. I
I
saw it. I mean,
thank you.
I
Thank
mean,
you.
they listen. Notice nothing ever became of that film. I think I know why.
It's so funny because afterward I remember being on set and meeting everyone who got the 8 parts because they were all there in like their little green dot suits.
You're like,
And
what did
actually,
you
yeah, and I had all these scenes where the apes. And this is the that ability of like the fun. You have to have fun because you're looking at like a 35-year-old guy who's on his hands and knees pretending to be a scared ape, and you got to be, and he's on the mat. You know, I played one of the lab techs,
do? Yeah.
and they're like they're giving you the kind of faces like right now exactly that would make you do this is literally what I'm looking at, right? And I'm gonna get close to the camera again. Amazing. We're doing amazing audio right now. He was like this. He was like, and because
Oh,
he's doing
God.
all the micro expressions for the little green dots, and I'm looking down at him, and I'm supposed to, like, the camera's looking up at me, and I'm supposed to have like this moment of conflict. That's what I decided to play. I was going to have a moment of conflict of like, I shouldn't cut this monkey. And in my whole head, I just like the urge to laugh the first time was so
Not to
strong.
laugh, because
Yeah.
what are we doing right now?
What are we doing? Exactly. What are we doing?
And that was a job that people wanted. You know, people wanted that job. Oh yeah.
Oh, they were the guys who booked that part were on cloud 9. They got to what's his name? The Andy. He's very famous for his mocap. He played from the Lord of the Rings. Gollum from the Lord of the Rings.
I'm
Tim.
never going to think of it.
Tim will find it. Don't worry. Tim will find it.
Okay.
Now,
Andy Serkis.
Andy Serkis. So they all got to go to basically Andy Serkis's school of mocap, of motion capture, for like 2 weeks and learn motion capture. It was like a big vacation. I think he has a school somewhere in the South, you know. And I still do it all the time because I prepared. I'd never acted before. It's one of my first auditions. Maybe 2 weeks I'm walking around like watching National Geographic.
Research, yeah.
Oh yeah.
This is what we do.
And all right, everybody, we're going to take a quick little break, and when we come back,
Are we going to get to the book at some point?
When we come back, we are actually going to get into Audition by Michael Shurtleff, the final chapter, the end of season 1, and we'll be right back. Hey, everybody, how's it going? Listen, we just wanted to take a moment to tell you a little bit about Michael Kostroff and some of the amazing things he's doing. So for all of you that are interested, you can always check out his course, auditionpsych101.com. auditionpsych101.com, and he's actually going to be giving away a 3-part course called Audition Myths, Tough Truths, and Logic, and that's going to be on Monday, July 18th, so just register before then, Monday, July 18th. If you're listening to this in the future after July 18th, 2022, you can still go to his website because he actually has a course called Audition Psych 101, and registration opens twice a year. And now back to our amazing interview with Michael Kostroff. And we are back, ladies and gentlemen, with Michael Kostroff. And I made fun at the very beginning, General Hospital, Banshee, which is a great show. But of course, everyone knows, I mean, you are iconic in probably one of the best TV shows. It's considered one of the best TV shows in TV history, The Wire. It was a great show. And surprisingly, you played a lawyer. Surprisingly.
I think that was the lawyer role that sort of kicked open the door for a lot of other lawyer roles. Yeah.
Now, I'm going to ask you, I want to ask you a few questions about The Wire, but then I promise we're getting into this book. We're never going to get to
it. You're never going to get this. That was all a ruse. You don't even, I don't think you've even read it.
Now, there's 2 things that I want to touch on with The Wire. First, I'm wondering if you talk to us a little bit about what that was like in terms of the audition itself, or and how the audition process, and then secondly, what was it like in the actual day-to-day of filming? How much room was there in terms of your ability to just use your own words? Was everyone strict to the script? What was it like? Because it really was an iconic show, which seems to have performances which didn't really look like performances from a lot of people. Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about that. And then I actually want to talk about typecast. But first, let's get into a little bit about your experience with The Wire.
Sure. I'll answer the second question first because it's a shorter answer. there are a couple of TV writers or writers that you just don't change a word. One of them is Aaron Sorkin, and one of them is David Simon. I don't know if any of the other actors did, and I don't know what their policy about it was, but I didn't want to change a word because that man's writing is like a finely tuned, like a tuning fork. You know, uh, I think there were 2 times in the entire 5 seasons that no, there was one time on that show and one time on another David Simon show where I approached him and I said, I don't think this line is exactly right. And those 2 times he said, you're 100% right. But other than that, I was like, I want to say exactly what he wrote because it's genius. I mean, there's so much folded into the writing that you don't even detect that sort of evokes certain feelings. He's a genius. The audition process was an interesting one. My sister is a producer, and she was working on this show, and she said, I think there's a little part that you could play. Do you want to audition for it? We don't do like nepotism kind of favor kind of stuff. In fact, it was unusual for her to invite me to audition, but she felt that I could do this part. And it was a guy that appeared on one episode, just a small part, because it's my sister, and in family, they're like, well, just, let's just give him a little thing. And I didn't get it. Didn't get the part. And then,
I wish you could see the hurt in his eyes when he just said that.
No, I have to tell you, I have to tell you, as I said, and I really do live by this, not getting a part is normal. And also, when it's complicated. When it's my sister doing me a favor, it's almost a relief to go, right, okay, good. There were no favors done, right?
Yes, that's a fair point. Fair point, yeah.
Right. So, but David Simon said, bring him in for Levy. And again, normal audition, other than the fact that it wouldn't have happened without my sister, because I don't think I would have gotten seen for it. So in that sense, I mean, it was a lucky connection. But we're careful about this stuff, my sister and I. Do you know?
Of course, it must be.
It's. I mean, some families would do it differently. That's just how we do it. Levy, I didn't know anything about the part. I did my take on it, and my sister said that David Simon watched the thing and said, "That's Levy. That's the guy." And Levy was only supposed to be on 2 episodes, as far as I knew. Wow. And David just liked what I was doing, kept writing me in. I think the plan was just for Levy to be in 2 episodes, and I was in 5 seasons.
And I loved you in that part, by the way, and I loved you for a very specific reason.
Tell me.
Because it was, what's a good way to say it? That character was unapologetically corrupt. Mm-hmm. It was realpolitik. It was like, this is just how it works. Why are you getting mad at me? I'm just telling you how it works. I'm showing you how the game works. Right. And I love that unapologeticness. You didn't try and play it corrupt. You didn't try and play it bad. You didn't try and play it mean. You were just unapologetically. And that's what I loved about it. That's what made me love your part and hate you as a character.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say, from talking to me, I'm sort of a softie, and I love people and I'm friendly. My friends watch that show. They're like, who's that? I couldn't believe that I got away with that such a character. And it's again, what I loved about it was that when fans come up with a big smile and they're like, oh, I hate you. It is a great compliment. It really is a great compliment. And he was one of the few characters on The Wire who we never saw the good side of, because most of the characters
redeeming qualities.
Yeah, none. I mean, and I think, I made certain decisions early on about the character, and they served me well for the 5 seasons. But I like that I know I came by it honestly, and it wasn't a favor.
Yeah, no, and you were great for that part. Now, typecast is both a gift and a curse, and you mentioned how. And Michael Shurtleff we talked about this in a previous episode. Some people are just never going to be leading men. Some people are never going to be the leading lady. You look like a lawyer. And now when I go through your more recent IMDb stuff, it is true. You're playing lawyer. I play Carlos and an assassin constantly.
Right.
I never play good guys. I always play like seedy guys, killer guys, drug addicts, thuggy kind of people.
Hmm.
And that's just what I play. That's just what I look. So that's what I get cast a lot for. And it's both a gift and a curse. What are your thoughts?
I hope everybody listening will listen to these next words. Half of the word typecast is cast. I feel like actors with zero credits get extremely worried about getting pigeonholed and typecast. Getting typecast is a gift. It means you have an identifiable type of role that people see you in. Ride that and write it and write it and write it and write it and write it.
Mhm.
Worry later, or don't even worry. I mean, what's happened to me is I've gotten to stretch out. I mean, look at Banshee. Banshee didn't happen until I
Oh yeah.
was, playing my usual roles for years and years and years. And
Hmm.
I recently got to play a psychiatrist, and which is not a corrupt psychiatrist. I've gotten to play some. I mean, I play mostly jerks, So and lately I've had some wonderful roles that were not jerks that had soul to them, and so uh, I think it's very foolish to. And again, this is sometimes a product of acting school where you think, well, I can play anything. Don't limit me, but
Hmm.
that's not true in the business because there's somebody who uh, is going to be more right for that. You know, and this is also true of if you're extremely good looking, you should not resent that being part of what gets you cast because you're playing those kinds of roles that need to be played by somebody very good looking, and somebody else doesn't fulfill that. It's not. We have whatever our essence is. So I'm a fan of typecasting. I'm glad for it, and I think working at all is a miracle. So I think people should not worry so much about it.
Love it. Now, let's talk about one more film. I promise, and then we'll get into the book. The Deuce
Hmm.
with James Franco and Maggie Gyllenhaal. I can never say that last name.
Gyllenhaal.
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 Yeah,
Yeah.
Gyllenhaal. Gyllenhaal. Perfect. Tell us a little bit about that audition and that process there. How was it like working there? Because that was also David Simon, right?
Right. So one of the wonderful things about HBO and David Simon is they like to bring back the
Once
same
you're in,
people.
you're in. When you're
Yeah.
in, you're in.
But what they do is they put you in very different roles. They like to really move us around. Like I just finished watching We Own This City, where
Oh
my
yeah.
my my friend Jamie Hector, who played a ice cold gang leader on The Wire, is a cop with a lot of conscience on this one. So it was similar. They had me read for a couple of different parts, and then they ended up booking me as Rizzy. And I love this part because he was a sort of a he's a desk sergeant, and they describe him as sort of a house cat. So he's like he doesn't want to. He's not looking to. He's not ambitious. He's working the desk. He's very dry, very New York, very funny. My favorite thing was I got to do the morning briefings with the cops. And those scenes were really funny. David wrote this very unusual way of talking. That was very sort of intellectual, and I love the part. But again, what's been great is that I did The Plot Against America, which was another David Simon. I've done 4 or 5 David Simon projects at this point, and it's immensely flattering. I will say that on the last one, on The Plot Against America, I finally gathered my nerve when my sister said, we thought you might be right for this part. I said, is this a straight offer? And she goes, I said, well, it'll be my 5th project for you guys. I'm just asking. And she goes, let me get back to you. And then I got a straight offer for it. But I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean, you make a valid point because at a certain point, I'm like, you know what I can do. Like, you know what I
yeah.
can do. Why am I still auditioning? I
But the
think
truth is,
they're on automatic.
I would have gladly auditioned. If she said no, you got to read for it. I was fine. It was a beautiful role, beautiful role. So yeah. I mean, it's nice being in a sort of a repertory company. I mean, watching We Own the City, I saw so many familiar faces from the other, especially from The Wire, and it's fun seeing people do something that's different.
Big time.
A lot of people watch The Wire and say, "Oh, those actors who played the drug dealers, they were off the streets, right?" I said, "No, they were from Yale and Juilliard.
Hmm.
They are trained, many of them Shakespearean actors or classical actors, and they made you believe they were drug dealers." And I'm always quick to make that point because I think there's something that happens with actors of color where people will go, "Oh, it's natural ability." I'm like, "No, that's training." you know.
Big
So
time.
my little plug.
And all you have to do, actually, Michael, is watch Treme.
Oh
Because
yeah,
I watched Treme after I watched The Wire, and all the characters from The Wire are in Treme, but they're all 100% different,
completely
completely
different.
different. And it
Yeah,
was such a trip. It was such a crazy trip.
yeah. My
Which
my,
brings
my
us,
role in the plot against America was very sensitive and reflective and thoughtful and concerned, and it was nice.
it's the moment. We're here, Michael.
Thank God.
Take my hand, Tim. Take my hand.
I
Take
want
my
to
hand.
learn about
Take my
auditioning.
take my hand. That's right. Take my hand. We're finally going to learn about auditioning. The listening audience
I
is
have
like,
one
"Are we going to
question
talk?"
though. Why
Yes,
why
sir.
why doesn't Tim talk? Why don't you talk during this?
I'll be honest with you. When I'm producing, I want to make sure everything goes smoothly, and I save my questions for the end.
Okay, all right, fine.
He's just so you know, Tim will be auditioning with us in the last part when we're going to do a little fun little audition game.
Okay, I'm a caretaker. I worry about people. So
Tim, are you okay?
I'm fine.
okay, all right.
You
I'm gonna
want
be
to?
quiet.
You gonna be okay? This is why we don't get him to talk. He derails everything. All right, so let's get started. So this audition, we've actually touched on a few of these points, and we'll bring them up again. But what I want to talk about is this is his observations that he says might be useful. It's literally called brief observations that might be useful, and it's essentially a summary of the rest of the book up to now. The first thing I want to talk about is something that he says that for me, I thought when I first read it was super insightful. And he says, actors decide to be strong in a scene, but you can't, quote unquote, be strong or be weak. You have to be strong or weak about something. He says, I feel strongly that you should not get married. I feel strongly that your father is wrecking your life. It has to be about something. No one is fully strong or fully weak.
Yeah, yes, and I think sometimes the character might be saying to himself, "I got to be strong. I got to be strong." But again, there's a reason I have to be strong because people are counting on me. Um, I'm just gonna. I think I'm gonna add like peripheral thoughts on a lot of these
Sure.
things. I feel like actors get in this bad habit of making the choices that they think will help them book the role instead of the choices that make sense, that are organic, that they can play with honesty and invest in. I think that game of trying to calculate what will book you the role is an act of insanity. And it's so much better to just recognize that we don't know. So when an actor goes, "Oh, I'm going to play it really strong," it's the playing part as opposed to just going, I have to accomplish something.
And I was just looking at the book because literally that's one of the things he talks about a little bit later on in this section. But it's so true. You never know what they want because half the time, and this is actually from this section as well, Michael Shurtleff says, the casting directors, the producers don't know what they want, but they'll know it when they see it.
Mm-hmm.
So the best choice for any actor is to come in with a strong choice because even if it's not what they want, they'll be like, oh, they came in with a strong choice. That was a good performance. Let's see if we can tweak it.
Yes.
Next up, yeah, good. Everyone's in. Tim, are you in agreement?
Yes, sir.
Okay, good.
That's the
Okay,
shortest answer I've given.
that's right. Turn your mic off, Tim. Turn your mic off. I'm just kidding. Keep it on. We're going to talk. If you want to jump in on these ones, Tim, that's great. And then he says, that's why you don't need to be afraid of going too far. Make your choice about something. That's controversial. And so I feel that hit a chord.
Uh-huh.
Tell me your thoughts. Because I think you can go too far. But what do you think?
Yeah, five answers. Here we go. So one of the things that is not one of the things that I think is always missing from audition books and audition courses is the category of the co-star role, the two liner, the three liner, where acting
Welcome to my
classes,
world.
right? But acting classes teach you about like your story arc and your big stakes, and you got to want it bad. But sometimes when you're playing a role that's two or three lines, it is not your story and it's not your job to create that amount of intrigue. It's very easy to, I see this happen all the time. People are like, well, I want to make a bold choice that's going to stand out and be like what nobody else is doing. I'm like, well, if you're playing the role of an usher and you decide that he's having a psychotic episode, it will certainly stand out. But it's not what's called for by the script. It's not serving the story. It'll be unusual. Yes, it's a bold choice. It's not a good choice. So I think we try to be interesting instead of trying to, one of the hardest things that is to just take the guy's ticket and show him where he's sitting.
without trying to make too much of a big deal. And I'll
That
give you a
that's
really good example.
mhm.
I was Emily Owens MD. Do you remember that show? They filmed that one in Vancouver. Emily Owens MD. And I was a paramedic. I had 2 lines. And I decided I was going to make a bold choice. And I was going to be excited by this person's like trauma. So when we
Mhm.
took the person out of the ambulance, I had a grin on my face. And they stopped like, you can't grin. I want to be just serious, just be very matter of fact, and let's just get that scene done. Because it's exactly right. My role was not to stand out. My role was to move the plot forward. So I
Right.
fell into this trap of trying to go too far, to be interesting, rather than just being authentic to serve the role. I was trying to stand out. And when he talks, this is a trap of the book. He talks, all the things he gives you are, like you're saying, to teach you how to audition for like the lead or the
Mhm.
co-star role,
Mhm.
not necessarily for that working actor, paramedic number 1 role.
Right. Yes, and that's something to be aware of with most acting books. I'm currently. It's
Big
funny
time.
because I am on a mission of rereading or reading for the first time some of the classic acting books as well, uh, um, and I'm reading Larry Moss's The Intent to Live, which is
Oh,
just it's so good. It's so good, and it's all stuff I know that, and I'm getting excited about it all over again. But as I'm reading, I'm going, uh, this. I've done a whole class on these 1 and 2 liners because they're almost they're just a different animal. They don't teach you in
yeah.
acting class how to do I'm sorry, sir, we're all full. They don't teach you that. I'm going to just cite a great example of somebody who really does it beautifully. I'm obsessed with this actress's work on Succession.
Okay.
Kendall Roy has an assistant, and she hardly has any lines. Sometimes she has a word or two. There's not a second that I don't believe that is the assistant to a high-powered, high-maintenance guy, and she is not trying to stand out. She's not trying to get noticed as an actor. She's doing the character's job in the story, which is something I talk about a lot. So you'll never go wrong as long as you're doing what the character's job is. It's not a matter of making yourself small or not interesting. It's just that for the bicycle salesman, it's an average Tuesday. For the kid buying his first bike, it's not. So the story is probably about the kid getting his first bike. For the salesman, it's just an average Tuesday. You don't have to make some fascinating choice for him, like his marriage is ending. It's not in the script. People do this all the time. So that's the little caveat on that one. And I think, again, I feel like it's never too big if the feelings are big and they're happening. If the feelings are big and they're suited to the role and they're suited to the script, they're indicated, and you're actually being authentic and experiencing them, it's never too big. I'm not of the school of thought that says when you're on camera, you got to just throw it away and mumble. We did that on The Wire. That was the style.
Because that
you know,
was
I mean, the camera can't see you think. You know, but you think about there have been great on-camera performances that were just crazy balls to the wall. Think about some of Robin Williams stuff that worked.
I always call him the Nicolas Cages, because Nicolas
Yeah,
Cage is known for making crazy, crazy choices, but they
and they
work
work. They
because they're
work.
grounded in something that's true in the scene.
Exactly right. Exactly
And
right.
when you are paramedic number 1, maybe be grounded in the scene and don't think go Nicolas Cage first.
Well, yeah. And then sometimes there's a two-line part that's like, my baby, save my baby. If you don't, there's no reason to go small. It is not an average Tuesday for you. It's an enormously traumatic, one-of-a-kind day. Why would you go small?
I think we got to make a note of that one, Tim, because I really love that. Is it an average Tuesday or is it an exceptional day? Because that average Tuesday concept is so many of these smaller roles. That'll be 275 right next door. Where's the bathroom? Just down the hall. Like these kind of little lines. These are just a random. You got to throw them away because your job is just to be realistic, authentic, and let the scene keep going.
Yeah, I need to do
Um,
that. I need to do that class again because it's. I don't. I always try to teach the thing that nobody else is teaching, and that's one of them.
well, you know what? In our meetup, we actually do meetups where all we do is work on 1 or 2 liners. So maybe one day we can have you virtually come in and do a little thing with us.
I'm committing to this on Mike. Yes, I would be very excited to do that.
You hear that for our 7 listeners? 7 listeners. I need you to show up to that meetup because we're going to have Michael there with us.
No, it'd be fun. Listen, I've already outed myself as somebody who just likes to talk to actors. I just really enjoy it.
And that's why we love you, man.
Yeah.
And okay, because you are very charming.
Thank you.
And you're very humble, and I love that. And this is something that we actually talked about earlier. And I said I'm gonna be saying this a lot because we brought up things in the first section that Michael Shurtleff is talking about. And he's another observation. Charm is useful. Since we use our charm to get what we want in life, it's amazing how few actors use their charm when they're in the reading or when they're auditioning. And that idea of making the casting director feel important, coming into the room without that sense of desperation. I always like to come into the room with a feeling. So my mentality is an audition is free acting class.
Nice.
That's one of the ways I always come in. I take every redirect as like, oh, that's a great idea. Let's try it. Yeah, that's going to be fun. Let's experiment. Let's play. And so I come in with that energy. I come in with a comfortable, how's it going kind of energy. I'm not very talkative. I say, how are you doing? I'm great. How are you? All right, let's get started. I'm excited. Let's do it. And that's it. I don't rush to leave, but that charm is so important in the audition room. And this is something Michael Shurtleff says, because it's not just for the sake of the audition, it's communicating to the producers and the casting director what you're going to be like on set.
Mm-hmm.
And that can sometimes be enough to get you a part. Thoughts?
Maybe. I'm going to keep saying we don't know what gets us apart because I mean,
Sometimes.
so many times I booked a role and I've said to my agent, really? Are they sure they want me? It wasn't very good. So yes, I'm going to just draw a line between charm and forced charm. When we try to be charming, it still feels desperate and uncomfortable to be around. For me, I'm going to just repeat myself. I think one of the ways to get to being more charming is to think in terms of their needs. How can I help you? Don't worry about me. I do this all the time. How can I help you? Let's see if we can make this work. And if not, don't worry about it. And to be at ease about it and give one of the best things you could do for your audition is imagine being a casting director. Imagine the stress. We forget that they have bosses, they have deadlines, they have needy actors coming in and out all day. And if you can come in there and say, shh, let's just take a breath. I'm good. Don't worry. Let's do this. It'll be fun. And you could really do that. That's charming. I think that's charming.
Yeah, and if you can handle redirects well. I always take redirects as compliments, because redirects mean I saw something I liked. I just want to get you to that next level so that I maximize your chance.
I want to draw a huge circle around what you just said. I love that so much. I love it so much. And people take it as, oh, I must have fucked up. No, a redirect, a note means I like it. It's like a second date. Let's do some more.
That's exact. Yes. And okay, so I got to tell you this story. Okay, I was auditioning for one of the Star Trek, and this almost never happens. She's an amazing casting director here in Toronto, and we must have done that. This almost never happens. You'll know that I think we did this one scene like 10 times. And every time, because she was used to actors freaking out with a redirect, she's like, listen, I'm so sorry. I'm going to get you to do it again. And I kept saying, no. After like the third or fourth time, I was like, stop apologizing.
Let's do it.
You are helping me. And this is fun.
Yeah.
And it just gave us, it just created such a fun energy that by the 9th take, I was like, what are we doing now? And she's like, I'm glad you're saying that because we're doing it one more time. And we would laugh. And it created a beautiful collaborative approach to the audition.
Yeah.
Because an audition is a collaboration. This is why your job is not getting the part. Your job is to come in prepared and make the casting director look good because they want you to come back because it's going to be that beautiful collaboration.
Love that.
So Michael Shurtleff says, what do casting directors actually do? And this is important for all actors to really understand.
Yes.
Casting directors do not cast. Directors, writers, producers cast.
Correct.
Most often, directors carry the biggest weight. Casting directors work closely with them, but we suggest, we influence. Casting directors influence. Casting directors suggest, but the decisions are out of their hands. And
I can't add anything to that. It's important for people to realize that. I just want us to keep reframing and get away from this idea that we're going before the Wizard of Oz you know, or you know, or the council that's going to kick you out of the town. You know, that's
Mhm.
we treat auditions like this, and as opposed to you're meeting a potential collaborator. They practice an art form, you practice an art form. How interesting, you know, and keeping it pleasant.
I This is a great. I'm going to give you another great example. My agent and I had miscommunicated, so I came in to do this math teacher role for some TV show, and I thought I had to have an Indian accent. And I know you've done a few accents. I think you've done like a Polish accent before, like a butcher. What's that show where you were a butcher or something?
Um,
Uh, with
um,
one of the new kids, with Danny Wahlberg,
uh,
like
uh,
one of the Wahlberg.
Blue
You were
Bloods,
talking, Bloodbloods. You were talking. No, the
War
story's
Bloods.
closed.
Yeah.
No, the story's closed. So I came in there and I had to do an East Indian accent. They wanted an East Indian accent. So I come in, I do this whole audition, and I'm like, when do we try to understand? And I'm doing this whole accent, right? And then afterward, the casting director, and they're very big in Vancouver, very amazing, supportive people. She was like, "That was great. Why the Indian accent?" And I was like, "I I thought I had to do the accent." She's like, "No, no, there's no Indian accent in this at all." So for a week, I'd been preparing this. I was like talking to my
Love it.
friends from Bangladesh and stuff from India, and then I couldn't get out of it. So we did it 2 or 3 times, and I just couldn't. I couldn't. Like
Oh, that's
I'd
so
start
funny.
normal, and then afterward, I just kind of looked at her and I was like, she was like, "Thanks, Yvonne." And I was like, "I'm gonna see you next time." She's like, "Yeah, don't worry." I'm like, "Have a good day." We knew I didn't get the part, but it was still that fun collaborative approach.
It's
I
so
don't know,
funny
maybe.
that I just want to tell you a little story about the Polish thing. So
Yeah.
the role is a Polish baker, and I'm in the waiting room. This is kids. This is back when we went in person, um, and I'm in the waiting room, and there are these great looking guys, like old, fat guys speaking Polish to each other, and I do not speak Polish. I'm not Polish, so I'm like, they're idiots if they don't cast these guys. But they didn't cast them. You know, it's just another story about how non-scientific this is.
Big
It's
time.
non-scientific. When we try to calculate it, we drive ourselves crazy. They cast me. Big mistake, because I don't speak Polish. And then they rewrote the Polish lines the night before we shot. So meanwhile, these guys, they could have just put them right in. So, oh, and we were shooting at a real Polish bakery, and the staff was there, so no pressure. But
That's the worst.
I love telling stories about how non-scientific this all is because trying to control it is nuts. You know, I was directing a play, and one of the guys that I cast was called back by mistake.
Oh
I,
no.
I saw him the first time, was not interested. Casting director misunderstood me. She called him back, and on a second look, I went, "That's the guy," and he was great. So,
Wow.
you know, it's trying to crack the code is nuts.
And this is the thing, the reason that the actors, this is the actor discipline, and this is something Michael definitely has. Tim, I know you have it as well. And it's something that you can't survive as an actor if you take every audition as like your only opportunity, and if you take it personally when you don't get the part, because
Right.
there's a million reasons why you didn't get it. And certainly I think we can all empathize. Anyone who's acted has booked a part where they thought they did a terrible audition
Mm-hmm.
and not gotten the part where they absolutely destroyed. Like they walked out of that
Absolutely.
room like, I think we're done here. You guys can all leave. You know what I mean? But you don't get it. You don't
Yeah.
get it.
All true. All true.
So the next little bits of advice that Michael Shurtleff has is, and this is about dressing, but I want to talk about slating.
Oh yeah.
Think of the image you are creating when you dress for an audition.
Mm.
A little bit can help out. Where do you stand on auditioning and sort of being in the part, like looking the part?
I think I like dressing for a part, and my policy is stop short of a costume. Like if don't wear a toga, don't wear a suit of armor. Uh, uh, um, Again, I was probably very very repetitive in this interview, but I feel like when people try to calculate the shirt that's going to book the part, that's not it. We should go back to doing it for us. What makes you feel right? What makes you feel like, oh, this guy would wear that? I love picking out the tie, especially ties tell a lot of story. Not because, oh, they'll see the tie and then they'll have to cast me. It doesn't work like that. So, but yeah, I like to, and also again, it helps them. When I go in for my
See
lawyer,
you in the part.
yeah, when I go in for my lawyer roles, I'm taking part of their work away by not forcing them to imagine me in a suit. I'm like, okay, so here's the suit. Now we can move on to see if I'm the right guy for the part. But yeah, I like to. It also makes me feel right. Shoes especially. Like I don't want to audition as a lawyer wearing sneakers. It just doesn't. You don't have the same authority.
And I 100% agree. I like the part when he says a little bit can help out a lot.
Yes.
So I always dress a hint. Like I have a blue short sleeve shirt for whenever I play a cop. It's a blue short sleeve shirt and has these little, what are they called? The little buttons on the shoulders. Epaulets. That's it. It has no insignia, nothing. It's just a 1970s navy, like light blue shirt
Right.
that looks like a cop shirt.
It's
I
enough.
have a green V-neck for when I play any kind of surgeon ER kind of thing. I have just these little hints.
Right.
And when I have nothing, it's just a simple gray T-shirt. That's my go-to.
And it's not going to get you cast or not cast. It's just something to help you.
And it helps. I think you make a very valid point. It helps them to see you in the role a little bit, so they don't have to imagine it.
Right.
Less work for them.
So
let's take that concept of a little bit goes a lot and talk about slating for a second, because there's two schools of slating. One, slating as the character. The other, slating with just as yourself with a smile. What are your thoughts? I have an opinion, but I want to hear yours first.
I have a third category.
Okay. Always a rabble rouser, this guy, huh? I'm giving him numbers. He's like, I want 3. I'm like, 3. Can you tell some advice? He's like, I'm going to give you 5.
What I recommend is giving a little bit of the essence of the character, or having the character in mind when you slate, because I think the contrast can be too jarring. If I'm going in to play an ice cold ruthless killer, and my slate is like, hey, I'm Michael Kostroff, I live in LA, I think it's too jarring. I don't act during the slate, but do share the part of your personality that gives a little hint towards it. And again, if I'm going in to play a horrible villain, I don't want my slate to seem mean or intimidating. It's just not overly gushy. It's quietly friendly, so that it's less of a transition.
And the reason I wanted to connect this with the costumes is because I think the same way. It's a hint. A little does a lot. So if I'm playing like a hardcore, mean, like character, evil person, I'll just do a kind of a serious slate but I'm not one to play. If I'm doing a really nice person, I'm just going to do just a nice same slate, but with a little bit of friendliness to it. And that's exactly the hint of it.
I think that people typically waste the real estate of the slate. And many actors do what one of my friends calls the hostage slate, meaning I'm not comfortable doing this, so I'll just say my words and hope that you don't hate me. It's this horrible, like awful stiff thing, as opposed to imagine that you're talking to them in person, and act like a human being, and don't look like you're miserable being there. I think that's part of the slate thing too,
And I think we could actually, and we should maybe talk about this. You could actually do like a workshop on how to slate, because it makes people so uncomfortable that they when you do the pan up and down, a lot of times in an audition, they'll say, slate with your first and last name, and then give me a full body. And either you'll zoom out or they'll give you an up and down, and that quiet up and down, that's when people freeze. They're like, I don't know what to do. Yeah. And it's funny because if we weren't being observed, it would be easy. But the second you add observation, people are like, what should I do with and they stand at attention.
Well, I think people have the mistaken idea that there's a right, like they have to get it right, like it's a test, as opposed to this is just, you don't have to make cutesy comments. It's like they want to just see your face and hear your voice and get the information and get a sense of your personality. I think that's it, but it's like when people say, sometimes they say, tell us something about yourself. It's like, it doesn't matter what the content is, just, it's not a test. But it's the same thing, by the way, with redirects and adjustments. Actors go, it's a test. No, it's not a test. It's a little playtime. It's a suggestion. We try it. Maybe it doesn't work. I had a director say to me, I took his adjustment, and he said, you're never going to hear another director say this. I like your way better. Like, okay, well, we tried. We tried it.
We tried it. Yes, we tried it. Always try. And I love what you're saying there, because I remember when I was starting out, man, it's like I would do like 15 or 20 slates for a self tape. You
No.
know, like it's not right. It's not right. And then now I think back and I'm like, I could have been watching The Wire. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? I
that's
wasted
right.
so much time doing these stupid
Could have
slates.
been reading one of my books. You could have been,
I could have been I could have
come
been
on.
reading one of your books. And we'll make sure to put that in the show notes. So check out his books. All right, the next thing. Uh, this is an interesting one, because I have two interpretations of this. He
Hmm.
says, don't believe what is written. The actor's job is to add dimension.
Hmm. I'm a big fan
So,
of this one. I'm sorry, you're going to go on?
oh, yeah, that's no. I'll tell you a couple of places where I interpret that, but you tell me yours first.
Yes, I think part of the prep is figuring out whether do you mean what you say? Are you lying? Are there other
Mhm.
elements to it? I think actors sometimes stop at one thing. Well, he says, "I'm really mad at you," but "I'm really mad at you" can mean a lot of different things. Yeah, I think he elaborates to that effect. You know,
Yeah.
uh, yes, I call it being skeptical about the material. Like
Oh, interesting.
sometimes people do say what they mean, but I'm like, vet it, look at it. I like to sort of say, what else could it mean? What else could he be saying? What else is going on? Like in the line where you're standing up to your abusive boss, are you also scared you're going to get fired? Are you also wondering if people have your back? There are lots of things going on at once while you're being brave. So I love that. I mean, there was a sort of a subtext running through my performance as Levy, which is when I was talking to the opposite lawyer, I was not only telling them what I was going to do, I was showing them how clever I was and how I was going to win. So there's a subtext running through it, going, "You didn't think of that, did you? That's what I'm going to do." See
Oh,
here's how
I just saw Levy right now. I
I
just saw
got
him
you.
right now.
So yeah, so I'm like, don't believe what is written. It doesn't mean that, and I don't think Shurtleff is saying this. It doesn't mean the text is a lie. It just means there's could be more
Way
to it
more
than
to it.
that. Ask a lot of questions, I think, is what I'm saying.
And one of the other things that someone mentioned once, it was on another time on this podcast, it was another time the podcast says, all the stage directions, whether it's for theater, film, and television, all these, he hands over this, they look over, they seem upset. Like these aren't for the actor. These are for the producers and the directors to visualize the scene. Your job, I mean, read it, but be skeptical about it. Just because it says it doesn't mean that that's the only truth that you can deliver. And
Correct.
actors get too caught up. Oh, I say, why did you hand that over? Why did you just say it that way? Oh, because it says so. Well,
Yeah,
that's not a performance.
we're very good at
That's
making
just,
things into tests. Look, I did all
yeah,
the stage directions. Hire me.
exactly. Let's go. The next tip that he talks about is about finding humor, no matter how serious something is. Here's what he says: when actors have trouble finding humor in a scene, it's usually because they don't know what humor is. They think it's jokes rather than a
Mm.
way of dealing with a problem. And if we go back, and I don't want to keep going back to The Wire because you've done so much more. But again, that Levy character, there was a lot of humor in his delivery because he was so smug
Hmm.
about things. And it wasn't a funny humor, but there was humor in scenes that could have been very stressful.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's humor in this. It's everybody's favorite scene where Omar is on the stand and he calls me out for being part of the system. And I'm like, you're a parasite on society. He goes, you are too. And it's a dramatic scene, but it's it's one that makes you sort of smirk and there's
Yeah.
definitely humor in it. I rewatched The Wire not long ago after 20 years. I had forgotten
I
how
can't
much.
believe it's been that long. I can't believe it's been that long, by the way. When you said that, when I looked it up on IMDb, I'm like, ugh.
I could tell because I was so much thinner. Um, I'd forgotten how much humor there is in that show.
There's little moments. There's little moments in it throughout.
There's a lot. There's one of my favorite ones is there's this sort of low level thug, and his job is to go around and buy burner phones, one at each gas station or each place, and his girlfriend is nagging him because she wants to go out. She doesn't want to do that. So later they're waiting at the jail. They're waiting to be processed or whatever, and she's nagging and nagging and nagging. He turns to the guy next to him. He goes, "I cannot wait to go to jail, man." There's a lot of humor. So yeah, I think this really connects with the earlier point, which is go further in your thinking.
Yes.
Ask what else could it be? What else could be going on? You know, um, I love finding the layers. I was reading a book that was actually not about acting that I really loved called Love Your Enemies. It's very much about the Democrat and Republican divide in our country, which you may have heard
Sure.
is really severe right now. And this guy was talking about the difference between anger and contempt. And he said, contempt is when you've given up on somebody. Anger has hope in it. I was like, oh, that's interesting as an actor. He said, people get angry and they argue because they want you to see their side. There has to still be a chance that you will. And I thought, boy, that's something we don't do a lot in our argument scenes. I'm trying to get
Oh
through
man.
to you because I care about our relationship. It's not purely just rage. And people go to this like one level, beat your chest rage.
You have to be angry about something,
Yeah.
and anger has hope. I think that's
Anger has
beautiful.
hope in it. You're trying to get through to the person, you know?
And this actually, it's funny because now we're going to go back to yet another thing we talked about that Michael Shurtleff brings up. And he says, when an actor says, I have a lot of trouble with cold reads, it's frequently because he's concerned about what they want
Mm.
rather than with what they are fighting for in the scene. And that goes along with that. When you're angry, you're fighting for someone. And I'm going to tell, the girl that broke my heart, the woman who destroyed my heart, I hate her. Like I hate her, but it's because there's a little part of me that wants her back because
Of
there's that hope.
course.
But I'm so angry.
Mm.
And this whole idea of forget trying to do the performance that you think the casting director wants. Be something true and realistic and come in with a strong choice. It's that same thing over and over.
So I had an audition years back for Tootsie, the musical on Broadway.
Oh, Tootsie, yeah.
Yeah. For the role of the agent, which is just a great part, for the guy's agent. I'm just going to say it. You can cut it out for anybody who doesn't know Tootsie. It's an actor who's constantly unemployed because he's difficult, and his agent, he's just driving his agent crazy because the agent can't get him any work. So I'm at this big
Spoiler alert. Spoiler alert.
I'm at this studio in New York where big Broadway shows are cast and rehearsed, and I'm
Yeah.
about to audition for a big Broadway director. But because this has been my life's work, I said to myself, my character's not interested in a role on Broadway. My character's not interested in pleasing or impressing. I've got a much more important thing, which is I've got to get through to the reader and explain to this reader in this audition room that I cannot get her a job. And so I didn't do anything but that. All I did was go in there and there was a reader, happened to be a woman, and she's like, why can't you get me any work? I'm like, no one likes you. They don't want to hire you. And I did the work of trying to get through to her, and didn't get cast, which is the normal outcome. They had a Broadway name.
But you probably did a great performance.
When they went to cast the first national tour, I got a straight offer.
Wow.
Again, that was not from trying to get an acting job or do it well or figure out what they wanted. It was simply going for what the character wanted and shutting everything else out. Character doesn't give a fuck about an audition.
Mm-hmm. I love that story.
I'll tell you another one because you said you like anecdotes.
Love them.
Coaching a friend of mine for The Wizard of Oz. She was up for the dual role of Miss Gulch, who takes away Toto, and the Wicked Witch of the West. Same actress was going to play both parts. Miss Gulch, Wicked Witch of the West. And I said, Nancy, you have two jobs. None of them are to please a casting director. None of them are to get hired. None of them to book the room or have the casting director like you. Wicked Witch of the West doesn't give a shit about any of this. You got two jobs. Get the fucking dog. Get the fucking ruby slippers. That's it. If you go in single-mindedly to do that, first of all, it's so much more fun. So much more fun. Nothing to be nervous about. I want the fucking dog. I don't care if they like me or not. And I think that's a great way to work. And I think it's a great way to approach an audition because, look, I get excited talking about it, because this is what we do. What we don't know how to do is book work. What we do know how to do is imagine what it would be to be the Wicked Witch who has to have those slippers. That to me is the cracking the code, if there is a cracking the code.
And the reason it's passionate because that's when you're just acting.
That's
when you're doing your thing, and when you're in that role and you're not worried about getting the part, and you're just you're in it, you're within that character, and you're trying to impact based on what the character wants. I think that's beautiful.
And,
It makes me excited because it makes me think about times.
yeah.
There's been a few times where that's happened for me, and I walk out of there going like, I don't even care if I get the
Yep.
part. I just
100%.
I am an actor. I just
That's
killed
what I
that. Yeah.
call liftoff. When you're like, I'm in it. I'm in it. I don't.
Mhm.
The other stuff is somebody else's shit. My thing is happening. And you leave going, I don't care if I get that. I've just had a great time today as an actor. It's a good actor day. And it's like you said, when you're reading that role, there's nobody else who can accomplish that for you. So you better do it. You better get those fucking
Mhm.
shoes. Get those ruby slippers. No one else will do it.
And this actually goes a little bit into the next point that Michael Shurtleff says.
Thank
This is
God.
interesting. The actor must always know more than the character does.
Mm-hmm.
The character does not know what is in his subconscious, and yet he is deeply affected by,
Mm-hmm.
importantly motivated by that dynamic. Thus, the actor must know what the character does not consciously know.
Yes, this is what I call brainwashing. Like you have to learn all this stuff, and then you have to forget that you know it, so that you don't eliminate the surprises for the character. One of the things I always talk to my students about is where are the surprises? What goes differently for your character than what he or she expected going into the scene?
Yeah.
And also people don't always have self-awareness, which is why, like, when somebody says, "Oh, I'm playing this bitch," I'm like, does she think she's a bitch? Or does she think she's justified in her complaints? Does she want to see the manager because she thinks the manager needs to know? You know what I mean? And so you have to sort of have the knowledge and then undo the knowledge.
You got to first know the rules so you can break the rules.
Yeah. Well, I'm so happy that you're going through this book because, as I say, it is a classic. And rediscovering the wisdom of this stuff
The little moments, yeah.
it's just great.
Michael, I don't know if I mentioned, this is the first book when I decided that I was going to be an actor. This is the first book I ever read, and that's why
I think it was for many of us.
Yeah, I still think that there's things that I learned in this book, like finding the humor and everything. I always think about those kind of things. And here's another thing I think about, Michael.
Yes.
Reality is never enough. Neither is truth. It must be heightened reality, selective truth, made dramatic by the involving choices of the actor. And I'm going to say this to you in another way, in a pragmatic way, with a very brutal casting director who I brought up on the show before, who was he was just tough. He was the only game in town for a long time, and he was just a really tough guy. And they let this guy go and speak to a bunch of like first year acting students, and they recorded it. And in a way, it's like there's no discretion or charm with this guy. So he said, but he had very good points, and he said, so what if you can act? So what if you're realistic? If you're in the audition room, chances are that's the bare minimum I need. What are you bringing what are the strong choices? What are you bringing that's going to make you stand out? Because I don't care about the realism of it all. I want to see a performance.
I'm going to push back.
Do it.
Because
I hated this guy.
Well,
I think
here's what happens. So sometimes when casting directors teach, they teach from what they've observed. In other words, this idea of make a strong choice, do something nobody else would do, because that's what they saw. But that's not how an actor gets to that choice. I did an episode of a show. I got on set, and the director said, "Wow, we changed the whole idea of this character based on your audition." And I'm thinking, I don't know what else you do with it. I just did the thing that made sense to me. Turned out it was unusual. That wasn't how I crafted the performance. I think we have to always hold ourselves to be accountable for honesty and integrity with how we approach our roles. A casting director will say, do something unusual. That's a poisonous suggestion. It's very dangerous because it leads to artificially unusual choices as opposed to something that just happens to be unusual. I want to apologize for being so long-winded, but I get excited.
I think we're gonna make this a two-parter, so don't worry.
Okay, that's fine. I get that every time I do a podcast. The truth in what he said is, I think if you're a good actor, that is all that we need. You just need to be you need to act well. as opposed to trying to impress this casting director with the uniqueness of your approach. But what I do think is true is that, and I'm actually reading a book called Method or Madness, where this guy is sort of taking apart Stanislavski, or the misunderstanding of Stanislavski. Absolute realism is not always what's called for, because they don't tend to write a story about an average Tuesday, as I said earlier. You know, it it can be very mundane and not interesting to watch. Although Nomadland was a very, like, boy, that was a straight ahead, very realistic documentary like film. However, there were emotional things going on that, it wasn't for nothing. So I do think that sometimes there's more to acting than pure realism, like, oh, I feel like I'm actually watching people talk, because sometimes heightened things happen. And also that theory doesn't accommodate style, like farce. Like a Wes Anderson film is not necessarily rooted in, absolute dead boring realism, whereas The Wire sort of is.
And the thing I want to pick out about what you said here is that it has to make sense. You can make a strong choice that makes sense in that
Yes.
scene or for that character.
Yes.
Then if you make a strong choice for the sake of making a strong choice, that's when it's insincere. That's when it isn't authentic. But if you get that realism and then see that maybe there's something in this character that I am noticing, like when you had that part in the sitcom, it just made sense.
Mm-hmm.
That's the strong choice. Not saying, I'm going to do this doing a handstand. That's
Right.
not a strong choice. That's a gimmick.
I'll give you an example from The Wire now that I'm thinking about it.
Yeah.
In the very first scene that I did, I used a phrase that meant something to me at Michael. I used the phrase "you people." I said to one of my clients, how many times do I have to tell you people? Now, I grew up in New York City with mostly black folks and in mostly black public schools. You people is kind of an ugly phrase.
It's a derogatory term, yeah.
I made the decision then, based on the script and my interpretation of it, that this guy was an absolute racist who had no problem taking money from black people. And that's where some of the ugliness comes, because I decided that Levy thinks of these people as like just jungle animals, which made it so ugly, because he's consulting with them and he's getting them out of jail. And that is a strong choice. But it was justified by the text. It was justified by the situation. And I I nourished myself off of that choice for the entire series. But it wasn't arbitrary, and it wasn't decided to be so that I could stand out or be unusual. It was one that I was like, oh my God, this white Jewish lawyer just said "you people" to one of his clients. And that tells me a lot. And another actor could have said, well, no, "you people" just means "you people, my clients." I made a strong choice, but it made sense.
And I actually remember that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I was like, oh my God, he said that to his face.
It's ugly.
He said that to his face. And they're like gangsters. Like, they're going to kill this guy, but he has no fear.
Yeah.
Which was interesting. So to our listening audience, and this happens when we do our meetups, sometimes we have veteran actors come in, we have new actors come in, and sometimes people do crazy things. And I'm like, why? It's like, well, I wanted to make a strong choice. And then we follow up with like, well, how does that make sense in the lines? Where did you get that from the lines? Where did you get that from the script? And they're like, I didn't. And it's like, that's your trap.
Well, it's the same as when people say, well, I don't want to make it all one note. Well, I don't think the character's worried about that. Or I want to show different sides, or, change it up. And it's like, well, arbitrarily, or because something else is happening? Let's look for something else that's happening in the scene. Fine.
And get something.
Right.
Now, there's another one here. This one's another one that's near and dear to my heart. And let's talk specifically in the audition room, because it's different on set, okay? And that is the idea. Michael Shurtleff talks about it in two ways. One is an obsession with touching hair. And two is, he literally says this: I'm confounded by how often actors are playing with their partner's hair. And then he also says, don't become obsessed with the realism of pantomime.
Well, he also says nobody does this in real life. Nobody reaches out and touches your hair. It's very unusual.
Yes, yeah. And I take it to like, but this is what people do all the time when they're like, yeah. And they're making these physical choices because, in the same way that a tie will not get you the part, sometimes I think people fall into the trap of like, this prop, I'm holding a glass.
Yes.
That might help me get the part. But in reality, that's rarely the case.
When people ask me about props and pantomime, I go back to the same thing of like, do what works for you as a tool, as the actor. Don't do it because you think they're going to be impressed by your pantomime skills and therefore hire you. That's crazy.
If it doesn't help you, don't use it.
Don't do
And
it. And
like having a glass because you take a sip because it says so is not going to help you.
No.
Just, you know what I mean? Just because so often, and this is my thing, so often people are like, I'm like, well, why did you have that paper in your hand? Well, it says I have a paper in my hand. And I'm like, well, how does that help you? And they're like, and then you see that moment of like, it says in the script. And that's a moment of realization, I think.
Yeah, I agree. And I think actors get really obsessive about this stuff. Shurtleff is right. This guy is going places. This Shurtleff guy.
I think he's got a future.
Yeah.
And which brings us to the last few lines of this book. And I'm going to read them. And then we'll take a quick break and we'll come back with one last little fun challenge. And I'm going to get your take on this. There needs to be more floating on air in acting.
I love that. I can't even find the words to say how much I agree with that. We try to lock down and steer as opposed to what I call throw the frisbee. Do your prep, ask questions, explore, but when you walk in to do it, stop trying to drive it. Be open to surprises, which is something else that Shurtleff emphasizes. I always leave a little bit because I'm not talking to the actor on set until I get on set. Who knows what's going to happen? Oh, I didn't know he's going to say that line that way. Now I feel something different. And to be willing to sort of step onto the raft and let it leave the dock. I strive for that freedom in my work. It's like when you find choices that work, you don't have to replicate them. They're in there. They may come up, they may not come up, something else may come up. And I just love that he says there needs to be more floating on air in acting. It's a good time to remind us all, it's supposed to feel fun. It's supposed to be fun. And if you're waiting until you've been hired to have that feeling, you're going to be waiting a lot because most of the time we don't get hired. This is my core belief, a pillar of my teaching, is if we're waiting to have employment before we allow ourselves to enjoy acting, we're going to be very unhappy creatures. So let the audition be afloat. When you're getting together and reading with friends, you don't think, oh, I got to get this right. Throw the frisbee. Let it go.
Well, hey there, dear listener. We're jumping in right now because this is the end of part 1 with Michael Kostroff. We had a marathon discussion and so much fun talking to him. And I think you're probably enjoying this as much as we are. But we went almost 3 hours with Michael. So this is the end of part 1. We're going to publish part 2 in a couple more weeks. So if you're listening to this podcast for the first time, please subscribe so you can check out part 2. And thanks so much for listening, you lazy bastards.